We've finally got the engine out of the Pikes Peak car, the heads are off, and I'm going to go into detail about what we found. Real quick before we dive into that, I just want to say if you like the channel, if you like what we're doing, please do like and subscribe to the channel. That helps us out a ton. And the best way to support us and help make sure that we can keep coming back and making content like this for you is to head over to flatironstuning.com. Your support there is what allows us to come back and make all this content for you. All right, so without any further ado, let's dive into it. Now, when Scotty pulled the engine and was very first going to start taking the head studs off, that's where we found the first piece of interesting information. There are 12 head studs, 6 on each head for a Subaru engine. And of all 12, only one of them was properly tight. That was the first thing that Scotty noticed when he went to loosen them. Everything was a bit looser than it should have been. Talking through it with Scotty, like his best guess would be that they were maybe like 60 foot-pounds instead of 90 foot-pounds. So just a little bit of effort to get them loose, but not anywhere near the amount of effort that there should normally be. And then, so we got all the head studs loose, and pulled the heads off and pulled off the head gaskets. Now, so we put up a poll on Instagram and on Facebook, based on all the stuff that we'd found out with the cooling system and the issues that we had with the radiator caps, do you think the head gaskets were okay or not? Well, we thought they were going to be fine. A lot of people thought they were going to be fine, and it turns out they were not. The head gaskets were definitely compromised. You can actually kind of see on the block here where the combustion is sneaking out of the cylinder, on the cylinder block itself. Basically, on both head gaskets, on this lower spot of the cylinders on both sides, you can see where the combustion gases were definitely leaking past the head gaskets. So the head gaskets definitely had failed, and that was a part of the puzzle. Now, the most interesting detail is what we found when we took the head studs out of the block. Pretty much they were all what you would typically expect, which would be like, so this is one of them. These are the Roger Clark 11mm extreme head studs, where there's a little bit of discoloration where the head stud is fully seated into the block. So that's going to be the hottest part because it's closest to the center of the block. But a couple of them, and one in particular, this one, basically had started to turn almost like bluish purple, which indicates that it was getting really hot inside the center of the block at some point. So now that we have all of this information, now that we know that we knew what happened with the radiator caps and the overheating incidents. So we're trying to kind of wrap our heads around what might have happened, and here's our best assessment at this point. And if you guys have a lot of experience tearing down engines that heat up and stuff, leave a comment below with what you think might have happened. But here's our best guess. So this engine block is the one that we put in the car after we had our coolant failure at Pikes Peak in 2020. So if you remember back to that, we had basically a hose that failed and dumped all of our coolant out right at basically the start line when we were practicing in the lower section. And the car basically ran for 5 miles with no coolant in it and completely nuked the engine. So when we replaced it, that is this engine. And it was all new heads, new cylinder block, everything was new because pretty much everything on that engine was completely torched. In 2020, when we made a run, that was a full run up Pikes Peak, but the car did overheat again. The car overheated from Glen Cove to the summit. And our best guess is that that's probably where the issue started again, is, with testing weekend or a testing week, we're just not really running the car for very long, but yeah, running up Pikes Peak puts a real stress on the cooling system for the car, as we've always been struggling with that. So our best guess is that the car overheated enough, that everything swelled enough that it started to maybe stretch the head studs. And what we're thinking is, like in 2020, that's where we put in the new radiator. We did some other cooling mods. We had the ducting, but it was really cold when we ran at Pikes Peak. We haven't really run the car a lot since then. So we never really put it through its paces, but it probably would have overheated in 2021 as well. So fast forward now to go into the Circuit of the Americas, and we have this underlying issue that probably got progressively worse when we kept pushing all the coolant out and the block kept getting hotter and hotter. So the last detail that I should tell you is about the cylinder heads themselves. The question is, well, are the cylinder heads work? With all this damage or with the loose head studs, with the damage to the head gaskets, were the cylinder heads work? The answer is no. We checked them with the straight edge. We had one of the techs with the straight edge check them again, double check them. The heads are perfectly flat, do not need to be resurfaced. Our best guess is that that initial Pikes Peak run, everything got hot enough to start stretching out the head studs to get them to the point where they just weren't holding as tight as they should be. And then from that point on, we were effectively lifting the head gaskets under boost, or lifting the heads under boost. There was enough pressure, as we were trying to run the car, that it was basically just, stretching those head bolts just enough to let some of that combustion gas out, and that's what was causing the cooling problems. So that's our best guess as far as how we've come to this point. So it all comes back to the cooling system and the issues that we've been dealing with, but there was an underlying head gasket issue as well, which again we think probably goes back to that first year we ran this car at Pikes Peak with this engine in it and overheated. Where we're at now is we're going to, the heads are fine, so we're going to reuse those, no problem. Obviously we need head gaskets. Because we see some signs of heat with the head bolts, we're going to do all new head bolts. And what we've elected to do is put in a new sharp block. It's just, we don't know exactly the state of this engine, and it's not, we might tear it down and rebuild it and keep it as a spare, something along those lines, but at this point to put it back together, we feel like the safest bet to keep the car reliable and get it back together running right is with another new sharp block. What we want to do is to shake it down as much as possible, put the car through its paces as much as possible between now and Pikes Peak race week, so that we can hopefully ensure that we have the best functioning cooling system that we probably have ever had in this car, and that everything is functioning properly in terms of head gaskets and all that sort of thing. So that's where we're at. And so yeah, if you actually had head gasket failure in the pool, you got it right, which we did not expect, but that's why we do what we do, and we tear things down to find out what the failure point is. And I think one of the big learning things we've learned from this incident is probably if the car should overheat again, at a minimum, what would probably be worthwhile to do is to take the valve covers off and check the torque on the head studs. Because it does seem like if the head studs are loose now, that might well indicate that there's enough overheating that went on to have possibly caused damage or compromised head gaskets. So I think we just need to be a little bit more aggressive with doing a more invasive check like that on the engine if we have an issue, and probably pull the engine out and go through it all to a greater degree if we have another one of those overheating issues, rather than see some positive signs or some signs of normal function and just hope that the engine is okay. So that's what we're going to do going forward, and hopefully that will mean that the car will be more reliable whenever we bring it to an event going forward. So thanks very much for watching. Really appreciate your support as always. And yeah, until next time, stay tuned with Flat Irons Tuning.